right. I hope you all thought of some really good oh, sorry about that. Hope you thought of some really good questions. Because Joey is going to try to answer them and tell us a little bit more about his experience with cybersecurity. And Joey, I'm a little concerned about introducing you because he works in some pretty secretive, sensitive areas, and so I wouldn't want to mess that up. So I'm going to let you do your self-introduction ever how you wish, and if you don't mind using that so everyone can hear. And, and at home too. Let's give him a hand. Joey LaGuardia.
So I have a master's degree in computer science, and I've been in cybersecurity for about 10 years. My experience is pretty diverse. I've worked with a dentist, an internet startup, a celebrity, and I currently work with a nuclear company. So I guess we'll go into questions now.
I think you turned your mic off.
Oh, is the switch on for the microphone? And speak into it?
Test.
Yeah, okay, that's good. With the Wi-Fi, it used to be where at a place that I frequented, you know, they would have a couple of different Wi-Fi. So if you walk in a different part of the building, it would say I'm in the lobby, or then the next Wi-Fi was I'm in the hallway, or I'm in the office complex, or whatever. And so you kept your phone, you kept manually switching from one Wi-Fi to another. And the magic that the new setups I've seen is just to name them all the same thing. You're in, like for example, the library. Well, maybe they have one hotspot on this end of the building and they have another hotspot on the other end, and if just they're being named the same, you can switch from one to the other. And is that a hole that is exploited? And that's, I think what they were saying is there was someone who was setting up outside with the same name, and so your phone would just switch to that one.
Yeah, that's a newer technology where they call it a mesh network. They'll have one router that's set as the primary router that controls all of the settings, and the other routers are hooked into it and just extend the network out. He was doing a pretty simple attack where, since there's no password, he doesn't have to know the password to fake the network. He can just make it with the name. When I was in grad school, I did a more complicated version where I was actually able to get on an existing network, put myself in between the computer and the router, and break the SSL connection and steal the cookie from Facebook and get into the Facebook account. That no longer works today because of the newer encryption technologies that will prevent the exploit that was used at that time.
I just recently had a, I obviously clicked on a link that was not a good thing, okay? And I have my VPN off, because I've noticed that when you use VPN, sometimes if your VPN is on, you can't get into certain sites. Like I can't get into my bank if my VPN is on, all right? So I turned it off and didn't think about it. And then all of a sudden, this, you know how it says, your computer is now locked up. Go ahead and please call Microsoft Security, blah, 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 blah. And I tried to turn it off and unplug the cord, but what I was told, and thank God I had just bought another computer, okay? And so when I took my, the bad one into the computer repair place, we noticed that it kept turning on. And what he said was apparently the hackers disabled something so that it wouldn't turn off, that it would keep turning on again and stuff like that. And so the only thing I worry about is, okay, they went ahead and they took all the information off my old hard drive, you know, transferred it to the new computer, but, and then apparently they did have to do some kind of diagnostics for the virus and junk like that. But you don't think they got into the rest of my computer and can compromise it, you know, because I didn't do anything.
It's hard to say without looking at the log files,
Uh-huh,
but typically when you see those pop-ups, you're not actually compromised yet until
Okay.
you click something or call them.
okay,
They're usually fake advertisements, and they'll purchase Google ads or something like that because they get so many advertisements, there's no possible way for a human to review all of them, which makes it easy to slip those in.
yeah, okay. But, okay, because I didn't do anything and didn't call them and any of that good junk, it's possible that nothing got compromised,
Yeah,
right?
if you didn't call them or
No,
click any
okay.
pop-ups, there's a 99% chance you're good.
Okay,
It's interesting because we get sold about the value of VPNs all the time, which I use one also. But it doesn't do you anything between your computer and the Wi-Fi node. If he's picking you up before you ever log on, then a VPN has no value, correct? It wouldn't protect you in that kind of situation.
If you connect to the VPN first thing, you're creating kind of a tunnel through the Wi-Fi, and then they would have to be able to breach that tunnel in addition to getting on the Wi-Fi network.
Yeah, but how would the guy in the park, with he's intercepting you, you're logging onto his network in the first place? So a VPN wouldn't help you there, would it?
It depends. If it's the newer encryption, it would be extremely difficult to pull the credentials out of it, but if it's not configured properly, they could potentially exploit the VPN and steal the credentials.
well, does a VPN do you any good at all then?
I keep on hearing no.
That's what I'm wondering, because it really is sort of a nuisance, because like I said, a lot of times I've noticed, like, if I try to get into my bank, if I have my VPN on, it won't let me in. Okay, so the minute I disable the VPN, then I can go ahead and log into my bank. So, I mean, what's,
The VPN's much more valuable for corporate employees than personal use. For example, where I work, we had a case where someone was on their home network and they had a kid that had some kind of smart toy that had been hacked, and foreign hackers were trying to use that smart toy to get a bridge onto the network and then attack our laptop to try to get into our company. And the VPN locks all of the traffic through the tunnel, so it won't really talk to the other stuff on the network.
okay, huh.
But for just a personal user, a VPN doesn't provide that much value.
Can you give us a brief history of the word cyber?
Yeah, cyber's a relatively newer term. When I was an undergrad, they used to call the field network security. By the time I was in grad school, they called it information security, and by the time I graduated, they mostly call it cybersecurity. It's just, they kind of picked up that that was the word that caught on the most and got the most recognition, so it became the more popular and more used term.
If you were to recommend like an operating system, a browser, other sort of things for just general internet browsing, would you have a favorite? Like,
The operating system, as long as you keep it up to date and you're using a newer one, it doesn't matter that much if it's a Mac or a Windows.
how about Linux though, or something? Is that secure, more secure?
There are so many distributions of Linux, it depends on the distribution you're using. For example, Linux Mint was geared towards being more user-friendly, but they didn't put enough effort into security, and their servers actually got compromised and a virus was embedded into the image. But if you're using something like Windows 11 or the newest Mac OS, those are really good. I like the Edge browser. I think it's currently has the most security features, but Edge and Chrome and Firefox over a long period of time, like 10 years or so, are back and forth on who's in the lead.
Okay, people like Avast and Norton and all the rest of those things, who's that? Who do you-
That's changed a bit over the years. Very recently, Microsoft put a lot of effort into their security, and the built-in tools in Windows 11 and Windows 10 are actually pretty good now for a personal user. Maybe not if you're a high-value target, but someone would have to put a lot of effort into targeting you to get around some of those tools. And then for the corporations, there's a new tool called Falcon, and it's not like the old antivirus that just searches for known files. It actually tracks all of the activity, and you can see what file is loading what websites and loading other files, and it gives us an insane amount of visibility.
So in the video, it talked about how the longer the password and the more complicated your password is, but I don't know about y'all, I can't remember a password for anything. And I will instantly forget it. And I was always told, you shouldn't write down your password. One, you'll lose it, and you never know who will break in your house and steal it. And you also shouldn't write it on your phone and a file thing. But there are password lockers. What's the best password locker?
I've used KeyPass in the past, and I know that the Department of Energy has used KeyPass. There's also 1Password is a good one that some government agencies use. A lot of them are starting to shift towards the cloud, and I don't really like the idea of passwords for accounts being loaded up into an online account. So for myself, I keep a password protected Excel file, and that file itself has pretty strong encryption, so I just have to remember the password for my computer and the password for the file, and the rest of them are in there. And you can also, it's a little tricky with browsers if you want to store your passwords in those. I think Edge is pretty decent with the way it handles it. Chrome has an optional passphrase you can add that will encrypt everything before it goes to Google, so even if Google's servers were compromised, they wouldn't be able to read it without your passphrase. And Firefox has absolutely no security on what's uploaded, so if their servers were compromised and you had your passwords in there, you would be screwed.
Duly noted.
With all of the ways that they can attack and steal the information, including my car, should we just give up?
One thing I've found is the longer a device has been around, the harder it is to break into it. And I think part of that is the speed to market and the lack of awareness. For example, when smart TVs came out, they had absolutely no security whatsoever. And when I say no security, I mean you didn't even have to get on the wireless network because they would connect to anything that would talk to them automatically. And now they're still not at a state where I would have one on my home network, but they're improving gradually, kind of like smartphones did.
Well, I have an old smart TV. What do you do? I mean,
Call Jim
Sell
Coulon.
yeah.
You can sell it to someone you don't like.
We've got a new one.
It's really hard to find non-smart TVs now, unfortunately. There are large gaming monitors that are coming out now, but they're brand new, so the price hasn't come down on those yet. I have a couple of 4K TVs that I got when 4K TVs were new because I kind of foresaw this problem. And it's difficult to deal with. Just as an example, there was an incident in Europe where somebody went on vacation and they posted about their vacation on Facebook. And then when they came back home, everything, including the furniture, except for their smart devices, was gone.
Except for some.
The investigators did forensics on the smart devices, and they discovered that someone had wirelessly connected to the TV from outside the home because it was the older kind that would just talk to anything. They were able to install a virus through that connection. And then that got them on the network, and they were able to send commands to the smart home security system to unlock the door and turn off the alarm.
Wow. Okay, so should I just use like a regular Ethernet cable and not use wireless to connect to my TV? Would that be better?
Buy a dog.
Not really, because most of the attacks are over the internet now, and unless you can turn off the Wi-Fi, it can still be exploited.
I was wondering, do hackers get more attracted to computers that are just always hooked up all the time? Does it help to disconnect your computer
It
at
helps to,
night, for example?
it helps to shut it down at night, because one of the first things hackers will check if they're looking for a large group of computers to build a botnet is uptime. Because if they have a computer that's on 24/7, they can see, okay, this is used from, say, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. and they never shut it off. So if they get in there, they can hack hundreds or hundreds of thousands of these. And then while they're not in use, they can max out the resources and use your computers and your electricity to try to crack passwords for corporations and break into other networks. And this has become popular with smart devices too. One of the first generation of smart refrigerators was actually hacked and used to steal trade secrets from a very large corporation. And the FBI had to take the guy's refrigerator and disassemble it in a lab and pull data off of the circuitry to figure out what happened.
Well, what about just unplugging the cable from the computer? Does that help? So it's just, the modem is still there, but it's not hooked up to a computer.
It's not that different, except when you shut down the computer, that's when most of the updates are installed. So shutting it down every night also helps ensure that it's up to date.
Does that hurt the computer at all, that you're turning it on and off all the time?
Not at all, they're designed for that.
Okay.
Yes.
So, I'm not I only use iPhones, which I've heard is horrible, and I get bullied for it a lot because I'm a computer science major. And so, but one of the things is like, like getting into them and hacking them. If you get like an iPhone 6, they're a little bit easier to crack than say the new iPhone 13, right? Or even like Windows 8. I did a project where I had to brute force my way into my Windows 8 operating system, and I did it, right? It's not that hard. So when do we know when it's time to go to the next version without like hurting our pocketbook? Because still, yeah.
Yeah. You'll be happy to know that the iPhone's a good choice. In fact, the Department of Energy will only use iPhones.
Really?
And part of that is when you have an Android phone, every manufacturer does the updates differently. So some of them don't put out particular security updates, some of them are slow to put them out, and some of them customize the code so much they have their own unique vulnerabilities that other Android phones don't have. It's kind of a mess to try to sort out from a security perspective. But with iPhones, it's always the same iOS operating system. And as long as your phone can support the newest iOS operating system and you're careful about the apps you install, particularly what permissions they have,
Yeah.
you should be good.
So what you're saying is I can message my group chat after this and roast all of them. Yeah. They're all getting it after this.
Everybody uses an iPhone.
Okay. Well, Matt Desjardins was like, you talk to him for me because
I know.
Yeah.
Cool. Are you from ETSU?
I am. I just graduated.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Well, the singular thing that I really worry about, and I'm pretty competent with, most of the desktop stuff that we've got today in consumer electronics and that sort of thing. I don't think there's anything that I'm concerned about on my computer that I'm worried about. I can handle most things coming in. But the thing that I'm most concerned about is the linked nature of all my financial resources. Between, you pay a credit card, for example, automatically from your bank account. You use a credit card, then you link that to your bank account, so you pay that, or any, you know, your electric bill maybe, whatever, you pay it off your bank account. Your bank account is of course, then you've got 2 or 3 other accounts on there to link your bank account, and then you use your bank account to transfer money back and forth between your 401k and your 401k to your other IRAs, for example. It ends up, if you follow these connections, they're all linked somewhere or another. And my biggest concern is there potential for somebody using a credit card or just getting into my bank, for example, and being able to backtrack that all the way to my other financial resources? Or start with a credit card and an electric bill and get into my bank, and from my bank go to these other places. That's my singular real concern that I have most of it.
It depends on how they're linked. I read a case where someone had a PayPal account that was hacked. And
That's a
they
real
had-
good example.
Yeah, and it was linked to their checking account, and it was able to pull from the checking account, so the hacker drained that too. And the checking account had an overdraft protection with the savings account, so they were able to drain that too. And the problem is, they're just all in a nice neat row where the source can initiate everything. I have 2 different credit unions and a checking account and debit card through my brokerage firm. So I have 3 completely separate financial entities that someone would have to hit to get to all of it.
But and you don't have any kind of links between them?
I have ACH links, which take 2 to 3 business days to transfer, so I would have plenty of time to see it and catch it if anything was started fraudulently.
Because, you know, I'd say I have 5, 1, 2, 3, roughly 5 individual financial accounts, but then 3 credit cards and then a whole host of other bills, PayPals and cash financial apps of one kind or another. Each of which has a separate password in and of itself, and yet, you know, they're linked insofar as I can move money between any one of them at any one time. And you know, how do you guard against that other than don't do it? You know? I mean, today, trying to pay your credit cards manually, I mean, it's just insane, you know, just trying to do it otherwise.
I like to have a checking account that's just for auto drafts and automatic payments, so it's not a card that I'm swiping everywhere where it might hit a skimmer, and that's in its own isolated little section. And then with a separate institution, I'll have one that I buy food with and gas and all of that stuff. And that way they would have to hit both at the same time for me to not have any money. And they're only linked through ACH. There's not a way to transfer money directly with the debit card. So it would take 2 to 3 business days, and I check my account summary every day, so I would see it long before it processed.
Can you explain the difference between ACH and just general electronic transfers? If I move money between, if I pay my credit cards, pay them today, they're done instantly.
Yeah, there's a card transfer, which requires a credit or debit card, and those can be done very quickly if they have the card number and can charge the card directly. Then there's a wire transfer, which is next business day. You typically see that with brokerage firms like Ameritrade. And then the ACH transfer is what most banks and credit unions have if you just link your accounts together, and that takes 2 to 3 business days.
What does ACH stand for?
Automated clearinghouse.
Can you request that payments be made that way from certain companies? I don't have that option, for example, my credit card.
Yeah, you can't set stuff to be paid that way, which is one reason I like to separate the auto drafts to a separate checking account. It's kind of minimizing risk, and I also turn off the overdraft protection with the savings account. So the worst case scenario for me, if one of my cards was stolen, is one of the checking accounts gets temporarily drained. I report it as fraud, and when the card's canceled and they send me a new one, I can pull money from my savings account if I needed it before they could replace it.
Is there some way to get like, okay, I know like with my bank account now, they have that, okay, what do you call it when there's like a secondary verification? Because,
Two-factor authentication.
yeah, okay. Would you expect that up on all of our credit cards and junk like that? Or not everybody seems to do that?
You mean for purchases or logging into the account?
Well, for logging in and paying.
Logging in, yes. Paying, it depends on the merchant if they have that option or not.
Okay, so they have got the option. You get that one.
And two-factor authentication is a good example of how security evolved. When two-factor authentication was new, I was talking with my celebrity client and I said, don't use that yet, I don't think it's secure. And the reason for that was there was no security around the phone. And it was using a text message to send the code, and those weren't even encrypted at the time. So what happened, you remember the year that you saw thousands of celebrities getting hacked in the news? Scammers figured out that they could go onto Wikipedia and find all of the information they needed to convince someone in the call center that they were the person's manager and get a new phone to assign to their number or forward their texts to the new phone. And so many of these people were going, how did I get hacked? I have two-factor authentication, and that's why they got hacked. But now that it's been around longer and they've figured out most of the flaws, the call center employees are trained to watch that, and there's more technical controls within the phone accounts to prevent that as well.
So with the two-factor, should they normally give you the option of email or your phone number? Which one should we do, or does it matter?
It doesn't matter much now. A few years ago, I would have said email. The thing that matters is securing the account it's going to. With your phone, and if you have Verizon or AT&T or whatever, you can look up their account security features and make sure all of those are enabled.
With the SCADA PLC exploit that was used on the Iranian centrifuges and that virus eventually infiltrating to the European utility markets, what are the odds of other state-sanctioned attacks flowing over into civilian sectors and other industries going forward?
I think it's much higher for foreign agency attacks than us, because foreign agencies will actively target our civilian infrastructure. For example, I read an article where a subway in Hawaii was shut down by a virus that was done by Russian-backed hackers. And I don't know why you don't see this stuff in the news more. And there's a ton of these attacks that are not public, and it's insane how often these attacks are attempted and blocked, and I don't know why they don't release more of them.
Are you familiar with Bitdefender Box 2?
I'm only a little bit familiar with Bitdefender.
I've been running one ever since they came out. It has really saved me a lot. It monitors all my network traffic in and out, and it just blocks it. I get notifications from other family members and occasionally myself that I inadvertently, or there was an ad or some kind of a pop-up that tried to send data back out, and it just blocks it, and I get immediate notification that that was blocked. It's really, over the last 3 years, it's really proved itself, because it stays updated, and it comes with all of their security package on it, and it is automatically updated regularly, sometimes daily. And as long as everything on my network is automatically protected. If I take, say, my laptop or my phone, if I take it out of my network, then I have their software either in an app or, some kind of application that's separately installed that works when I'm out of the network. They work together and it does the same thing. Another thing, what is your take on virtual credit cards? And one in particular is a company called Privacy. It's very handy to use. They generate, you can just go in and say you want to make a payment to Walmart, let's just say. You can go in your account, you can create a virtual Visa card, and you can put a spend amount on there, either one time, monthly, or each transaction, but you can set a maximum amount from $1 up. And you can create that and get all the numbers and everybody takes them. Everybody I tried takes them. And so I have several of them, particularly if it's a new account, I'm not familiar with them, or I'm not, I don't trust them maybe to charge the right amount of money. But anytime there's a charge put on it, I get an immediate notification, really right now. And I can lock it, I can delete it. I have full control over how much, and I can increase or decrease the amount on that card with that particular in it. The first merchant that uses it, it's locked permanently to that merchant. Nobody else can use it. If you're not familiar with it, you might want to look into it. I find that's pretty helpful.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool new feature. I've seen it, but I haven't used it myself, mainly because I don't use credit cards. I only use cash and debit.
Yeah.
And the Bitdefender device is a pretty cool thing. They're making some more stuff like that now, but it's not really common yet. There's a free DNS security you can get through OpenDNS.
Right.
And Netgear recently put something similar to that in their newer routers that you can purchase that monitors everything on your network. I think that'll become much more common over the next few years.
Yeah, things are changing. I use Cloudflare for my DNS, but there's just a lot of things are changing, but it's
Okay, I'm done. What's DNS?
dynamic domain server.
Oh, okay, domain, okay,
In other
That's-
words,
dynamic domain
it's,
server.
it's how you, it's an address reader, basically.
Every address on the internet is a number.
Okay.
So when you type in google.com, DNS is what tells your computer which number belongs to google.com.
Since you don't use a credit card,
Right.
why is the debit card better than a credit card?
I just don't believe in debt and borrowing money, so a credit card's not an option for me.
If you have a Wi-Fi network in your house, is it possible for somebody to just drive by on the street and pick up all of your Wi-Fi?
If you don't have a good password on it, yes. And I've also read about cases where hackers would send a drone out to a neighborhood and look for Wi-Fi that had weak passwords or no passwords and try to hack into devices on the network with that.
So if you have a password, is it secure then?
If it's a long random password, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Do you agree, a lot of sources more recently say that just a long passphrase, say, I went to the doctor. Use that as a password rather than an alphanumeric number of characters. It's hard to remember. kind of password. It's something simple like that that's pretty easy for you to remember, but they're more difficult to hack than an alphanumeric password. Do you agree with that?
To an extent, if you have a small number of words, there's still a potential to use a type of dictionary attack where a computer goes through combinations of words from a common dictionary list. I personally use acronyms for my passwords and mix in a couple numbers and symbols. And in grad school, we cracked passwords, and I actually managed to beat out the rest of the class when I was doing that. And I found that the acronym-based passwords were better than the combination of dictionary words unless you put a lot of words together.
Well, I mix it up. I use both. I mean, it'll be like a long passphrase, just something like I said there. But in with that is alphanumeric and characters. So it's not just straight letters.
That would be pretty good. Someone would have to be really determined to even attempt to crack something like that. Usually what they get is someone takes, say, the word dragon, and they replace the O with a 0 and add a couple symbols to the end of it, and that's really easy for a computer to figure out because it can take words and do small changes and common patterns. But what you're doing would be pretty difficult. And most attacks don't target passwords nowadays because it's harder to crack them.
Can passwords be hacked or figured out in pieces, or do you have to have the whole thing all together?
Yeah.
Is there any kind of feedback that a person trying to hack a password can know that they've got part of it right? It's like that game Mastermind, when you've got part of it right, you can tell you've got part. You may not know which part, but you know that you've got part.
At some point in the 90s, it was encrypted in 2 separate parts and you could crack one at a time, but all the modern encryption, it's all or nothing.
What's an example, what would be an acronym-based password? Explain that system. I'm curious. I know what an acronym is, but what do you choose for it?
Like, you could pick a phrase that's not very common, like my favorite dragons are blue dragons. Take the first letter of each of those and then replace one with a number and make 1 or 2 of them capitalized, and you would have an acronym-based password.
So you're not basing it on the website name or anything, you're picking a random phrase or some phrase that means something to you.
Right.
But you use one for each site?
I just use that for the password I log in with and the password to unlock my password manager, and the rest of them I have randomly generated 16-character passwords.
Yeah, I use LastPass as well, and I just recently had to do a factory reset on my phone because it got stuck in the 2-factor authentication loop, and it I couldn't get out of it, but anyway, that took care of that. But you gotta, you'll find that you gotta trust somebody. Life is terrible if you can't trust somebody. Like, I'm pretty secure and I do a lot of things like I mentioned, but what I don't do is that I want my browsing history. I want to be able to go back to something I looked at a week ago. I don't want to have to try, because I'll forget where it was, how to find it, and it's something that I need. And I'll invariably use my Google history, my browsing history, to go back and find that. I trust Google more than I should, but enough to have some kind of a decent life.
Yeah, and that's, Google's been around a long time, kind of like the smartphones and the laptop computers. It's more the brand new emerging stuff that tends to be vulnerable and very targeted. One of the best things you can do is ask yourself, is there a reason for this to have smarts built into it? Is there an actual benefit that outweighs the risk? And if it's a coffee maker, the answer is probably no.
Well, see, like I was saying, see, even my TV, I have several Roku TVs, and they're all behind that Bitfinger box. So they can't send anything out.
That helps a lot. It's also good to make sure that they're supported and updated, which with device to device varies a lot.
Right.
The biggest issue with the first generation of smart TVs is they never got any updates. So it was vulnerable and unfixable.
That's one thing about smart home devices from different manufacturers. I have some light switches and different things, but unfortunately, for Google Home to work, you have to go to the manufacturer's site to set that up if you want it to do certain things on a schedule. You know, Google Home can't do that. It can turn them on, turn them off, and that sort of thing. You know, you have control of that. But as far as whether it comes on at sundown and off at sunrise, or does different things at different times, you have to go to the devices app to set that up. And so in some respects, having all of it, you know, it's a two-edged sword. Do you get everything from one source where all of that, all those different things are done through one pretty secure company? Or do you try to rely on these independents? And, you know, a lot of people got burnt with the Wise Camp. And Bitfinger knew about it, and I'm mad at them because they knew about it 2 years before they disclosed that vulnerability.
And it depends on the company too. Some really big companies like Microsoft work very closely with intelligence agencies, and that has helped their security a lot in recent years.
That's getting better. They're finding that they're going to have to do that.
This file that's created where you store the passwords, can you make another file in which you could store the history like he was talking about, and have a separate file like that just for his history?
Yeah, there is a way to export the history, and it's a little different with each browser, so you could just search how to export history in, and search for Chrome or Edge or whatever you want to back up your history from.
That's something you'll have to do regularly. So, you know, it takes a lot additional effort to try.
You can also, with things like Google, if you're signed into Google, it'll sync with the cloud.
Yeah.
What's your opinion of virus checking programs like Avast and malware bytes? And some of these have a pay version and a free version. Is the pay version worthwhile getting?
The Microsoft built-in security has pretty much caught up with those. Malwarebytes is really, really good at finding an existing hard to remove infection and getting rid of it. But you probably would already have blocked or found it with the newer Microsoft security.
Well, I got an Apple, so
Yeah, the Apples, they're a little hard to get into, and you normally see signs of it, but it depends on what you're using it for. If you're just browsing the web, especially if you're using something like the Edge browser, it would be pretty secure unless you click on random links or download and install something that's malicious.
are these pay versions of these things worthwhile, do you think?
If you're more likely to be a target, or maybe if you're on a Mac, they might be worth it. But for the typical user, especially on Windows where there's built-in security tools, I wouldn't think it would be worth it.
Okay, so you said maybe if you're on a Mac. So I've always heard this, I've always assumed it was a myth that Macs can't get viruses. Now, I'm assuming that's a myth.
Yeah, when my celebrity client clicked on a link that installed a virus on her Mac once, and the security tools that we put on her computer, which at the time was really good, but we've changed since then because it's not, so I won't mention the name of it. It was blocking the outbound traffic attempting to send her data out over the internet. So I have seen viruses running on Macs before.
Is it viruses or malware?
Viruses are a type of malware that make the terminology a little confusing. Malware is any type of malicious code, and a virus is a type of malicious code that has the ability to spread or distribute itself in some way. Also, to follow up on yours, the myth came from Apple commercials where they used to say that Macs did not get viruses like PCs.
Yeah.
And there were 2 incidents that caused them to quickly cancel those commercials. First one is someone made a virus that would spread through Windows and Mac computers, but it would only attack the Macs. As you can imagine, since nobody using Windows noticed it, it spread really fast. The second issue, and this was only compromised for a few minutes, but it really shook them up. Someone managed to hack the Apple servers and start to distribute their virus as an OS update.
Oh, no. Yeah, well, like, I've been to like the Apple store, and I remember coming in and there's this lady, and she's like, I swear my computer has a virus on it. And the guy working behind the counter was like, Apples don't get viruses. You're insane. You just don't know how to use your computer.
That's one of the interesting things about cybersecurity. The knowledge of cybersecurity and people in general that are not in the field is very, very small compared to most topics. And I think that's just because most people don't have a good source of the information.
Yeah. I don't know, like, before I came here, I like Googled it, because I'm an information systems major, so
Nice.
I'm more like data, right? But so I took my intro to cybersecurity, and then that's all. I was like, I'm good. And so I was trying to Google it, and it was all like all the very basic things. And so I was trying to like get more like technical, and like it's very void of that.
Yeah, it's hard to find unless you know where to look. CISA.gov, CISA, is a really good source to find recent vulnerabilities and some attacks and stuff, and good security guidance. Other than that, it's usually course materials or certifications in the field.
Yeah.
One of the things, I have a kind of a good grasp of your background because in my GA ship, I was a systems administrator at ETSU.
Okay.
And I work with systems administrators a lot in my current job. They know a lot about servers and how they run, but they can't keep up with the security side because it changes so fast that unless you do it all day, every day, you're gonna miss a lot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even just like the way you code changes because of security vulnerabilities, and it is like stressful because like we're not good at documentation. Like you have to like pull out our teeth to get us to document something, and then for us to go look up the documentation, it's kind of like, oh well, I've been doing it like this for 20 years. Well, that's not a good idea because there's better practices and yeah.
And that's just stuff changing and you don't hear about it changing.
Yeah.
I have a friend who's a programmer and he'll ask me for advice on stuff fairly often in security.
Yeah.
He took the information security class you did. He was, before the class, thinking about going into cybersecurity, and afterwards he told me that the main thing he learned from the class is he's not cut out for cybersecurity.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what it is.
Well, no, like it was fun, but I also had it during COVID, so it was awful. And so I was just like playing with my like my virtual box and I was like, this is so cool, but I could never do this. I should stick with my coding.
During 2020, cyber attacks just exploded
Yeah.
frequency. It's insane.
Could you say something apart from personal computing and stuff about the systems and the threats and the sort of redundancies built into the whole international finance system? The entire Earth today is globally, all the entire financial network that runs the entire planet are all connected electronically. And I think a lot about how vulnerable, not necessarily vulnerable, but what an obvious potential threat it is. What do they have? I just can't even fathom the complexities of a system like that and what sort of safety mechanisms it got built into it.
That's one of the reasons that most transfers take 2 to 3 days. They have a very strict verification process, and with larger transfers, a person has to actually look at it, especially in bank-to-bank transfers. And I haven't worked in the financial industry, so I don't have first-hand experience with it, but I know that government agencies help design the security and they're watching out for vulnerabilities on it. And they have one of the most secure and strictly regulated networks in the world.
We're coming up on close to the end of our time, and I was pointed out to me that we haven't given the folks that are on Zoom a chance to ask a question. So let's see if there's any questions out there. Let's see. I'm going to click on Ask to unmute each of the speakers. Does Sandra or Brenda, do either of you have a question that you'd like to ask?
Thank you.
All right, we'll leave the opportunity open for you, and but we're coming down to the line. So has anybody had a question that you haven't been able to ask that you would like to ask now? Any shy folks in the
What can we
audience?
do to protect ourselves?
Awareness helps a lot with things like public Wi-Fi and a lot of the newer smart devices. Looking at what permissions things are asking for on your phone is a good one. Most people, if they install an app, it asks for a permission and they'll click allow without even reading what it's asking for. If you're using, say, a messenger app, there's no reason for it to have permissions to control your Bluetooth or connect to access certain parts of your phone. You just kind of think, does it make sense based on what's this app's doing for it to access that?
Sandra, did you have a question? Sandra?
No, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, well, I don't have a question.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you for being here tonight. I'm going to go ahead and mute your microphone back again.
I asked you this before about the Alexis. I know several older people that just love Alexis because they ain't gotta get up, they can tell, shut the lights off, turn TV, whatever. How big of a security tragedy is this, the Alexis?
The more you connect it to, the more vulnerable it is because it controls all of these other smart devices. And one of the intelligence agency heads, I forget which agency, stated recently that those personal assistant devices are one of the most serious risks we have to national security today.
Bingo.
This question may not bear exactly on cybersecurity, but are there not people out there who are so lonely that they adopt Alexa or some similar one as a friend and they keep calling them or asking them questions or?
I'm sure there are, and people like that would be very susceptible targets to someone who wanted to manipulate what the device was saying to them. especially if they have some kind of emotional state that is particularly vulnerable.
Once in a while, if I ask Alexa something and she says something and I'll say, thank you. And, you know, frequently she'll come back with a response by, oh, I'm glad to help, or some other thing, or have a wonderful afternoon, or kind of crazy.
What about home security systems like Safe? What do you think about those?
I would not use a smart home security system because I think it's easier to hack into the system controlling it than it is to pick the locks.
What was that? I missed that.
Since it's air gaps from anything else, typically, isn't it?
Oh,
It depends on the system. Most of them connect into an Alexa or something like that. Some of them connect directly back to the company, but if someone managed to hack the company, they would have access to thousands of homes across the country, and that makes it a pretty tempting target.
How do you prevent data sharing? So like your data being sold. I know like particularly like you can Google your self, and there is information like I was like, I don't, like make that public. Why is that still being shared and you can pay for my data? How do you prevent that?
You mean like addresses and stuff?
Addresses, yeah, and it's like, why would anyone know where I live?
A big part of that is kind of what I consider flaws in our legal system. They've made it in a way where there's no way to really hold these companies accountable or get off of them unless you can find literally every company that has your data and opt out of them all yourself. And that's just kind of an issue of the way the system works right now. With some more detailed information, you can read privacy policies for every device and software you use and think about if you can trust the person you're giving information to. For example, with Facebook, several years ago, they were in court because they were caught illegally selling user information in violation of their own privacy policy. They were fined and said they stopped. Several years later, government agencies figured out that they never stopped, and they fined them again and actually followed up and made sure that they stopped this time. But Facebook has a history of being dishonest and negligent with user data, so you can just kind of look at the history of a company and think, do I really trust this company with my information? If you look at Twitter, there's no negative history like that with user privacy.
And I just think it's weird, like, I could Google something about like coding or whatever, and then on my Instagram feed, I'll get posts about learning technology or coding, and I was like, why? And it'll be really random because it may not be my regular.
Facebook owns Instagram, and Facebook puts little trackers in most of the websites. I think the websites put them in for ad revenue or something.
Yeah.
And Facebook uses that because if you connect to the website and they have a little plug into Facebook in the back and you're signed into Facebook when you connect, they know you connected from that site and they know who you are, so they can track a lot of information. And on your smartphone, for example, that Messenger app, I had a PowerPoint presentation when I would present at ETSU. I had 4 pages of slides that I had to fill to list all of the permissions that the Facebook Messenger app has. So I strongly suspect that they're illegally collecting more than they say they do, especially given how many times they've been caught doing illegal stuff with information before.
What browser do you recommend for smartphones?
For smartphones on an iPhone, the Safari browser, the way the iOS works, it's basically always the Safari browser in terms of the actual functional code regardless of which one you install. With the Android phones, probably the Chrome browser, because it has really good sandboxing built into it.
You don't like DuckDuckGo?
I don't think it really helps that much because of all the tracking through apps and things outside of DNS lookups. Most of the tracking is done through apps or through the websites you're visiting, so how you search for it doesn't help that much.
We're gonna have to, whoever asks the next question will be the last question, because we have to go. Anybody wants the last question?
Why?
The last mistake.
Why? What? The meaning of life?
That's my question, why?
Should we just give up? I'm still not convinced that it's worth all the effort to try and stay ahead of all of this.
Well, any effort you put in puts you in a better position than no effort. Even if you just avoid public Wi-Fi, make sure you're using stuff that gets security updates and is updated, and use a password manager with strong passwords. That makes you very difficult to get in unless you're being specifically targeted, and also just avoiding things you don't need, like a smart coffee maker or a smart toothbrush. It's just, if it's obvious that there's no significant benefit to having smarts in it.
Amazon is price and free ship. Amazon knows you real well.
Let's see. Okay, well, let's give Joey a hand. For those that would like to see the answers again, and also we're still perfecting the art of Zoom, so I think that they couldn't hear very well on Zoom. You can go to knoxsciencecafe.org, and then you'll see the information about tonight's meeting, the evolution of cyber hacking, and there's this little icon here that says YouTube on it. If you click on that, in a couple of days, we'll have tonight's meeting will be available to view. Right now you can go see all the ones we recorded like over the last probably 2 years or so. Again, the address knoxsciencecafe.org, and it's the one that's on the bumper sticker. So if you can't remember, take a bumper sticker tonight because it's already written down. Don't forget we have the brochure about Spirit of Truth Fellowship if you don't know who that is. And let's give another big hand to Doug and Miranda for bringing the food. Believe it or not, it actually might be helpful if you wanted to grab a little piece of cake or a cookie on your route, because then we don't have to carry it out. So you might like to carry it out more than we do. Is anybody, oh, let's see, there was one thing I was going to mention about the meeting for next month. Let's see. Oh, where's my keyboard? Is that no, oh. Battery must be dead. So I'm going to go click on the events list here. And how about down? So we're into this was the June meeting tonight on cybersecurity. Next month will be freshwater mussels of the Clinch River. There's more biodiversity in the Clinch River for freshwater mussels than anywhere else in the world, is what I understand. Our presenter is Geronimo Silva. He's a PhD student at UT, and he was our expert also about 2 years ago. If you remember the meeting about the Hellbender salamander, we kept having to postpone it, and then it finally went to just Zoom only. It's the same guy. He's no longer working with that contract. Now he's working with mussels and doing his PhD research. So that'll be next month, freshwater mussels on July 7th. So after you see all the fireworks and everything, just get excited because it'll be time for Science Cafe again. We appreciate everybody coming tonight, and we'll see you on July 7th.